Good evening and welcome to the Death Café. We're so honored to bring you this hour together for you. And death cafes are practiced all over the world. When you come on and sign on, give a little chat in the comment area. Let me know where you're from, where you're calling in from the world. Often we have people from all over the world. And that's also the place where you can ask any questions or comments and we can get a dialogue going. My name is Dr. Dearhart, and I have the honor of being the founder of The Heart Way, a nonprofit that's dedicated to supporting those before, during, and after death, providing advocacy, end of life care, education, and ministry to those that are dying and their loved ones. And I've had the honor of doing this work for 35 years, and the Death Cafe is one of my favorite things to do. Before we get started, we can just spend a moment just grounding. I don't know what your day was like, and we can come together in community. Hi, Gray. Welcome from Texas. So when you're ready, go ahead and allow your eyelids to gently close and make your way to your breath and find a nice deep breath in. And as you exhale, just let it out with some sighs. Just allowing your body to settle in and feel yourself here now. Your feet or what you're sitting upon. And allow yourself to settle beneath the mind into the quiet space, like underneath the waves and the storms of the ocean. Create a welcoming, inviting, and compassionate environment for yourself, honoring all that's flowing through you and honoring all that might be open to knowing. Just creating that peaceful space for yourself. And I'd love to take that compassion and send it out into the world. So through a kind of loving kindness prayer, may all beings feel safe and free from harm. May all beings, minds, bodies, and spirit be connected with grace and wisdom. May all beings feel loved, and may all beings know that they are love. May it be so, from my heart to yours. Well, good. Welcome to the Death Cafe. And as you come on live, go ahead and say hi and let us know where you're from in the world. And I want to do a brief introduction to what a Death Cafe is. Some of you may be here for the very first time or watching this for the very first time. Death Cafe is interesting. It identifies both a movement and an individual gathering that occurs as part of the movement, like what we're doing here tonight. The movement began in Switzerland by a gentleman by the name of Bernard Cretez. He held the first, what was called Café Mortel, in 2004. Later, a British web designer, John Underwood, was inspired to host a death cafe in London, and he did that in 2011, gathered in his home. As of this afternoon, I just checked, there's over 14,442 death cafes happening in 81 countries around the world. So we're not alone, and it's been an important platform for people to come and have a discussion around death, have a safe place to do inquiry, and listen to each other and our thoughts and feelings. Death Cafe events are always offered on a nonprofit basis, creating a respectful environment for all, a confidential space with no intention of leading to any conclusions, products, or course of action. And if we were together, I'd serve you tea and some chocolate. So if you're cozying in a place, grab yourself a cup of something and a little munchie if that feels right for yourself. The objective of the Death Café is simply to increase awareness of death with a view in helping people make the most of their finite lives. Then we're accepting our lives, life is having an ending. We live more fully, we live more into life, discarding the external roles and petty concerns that are essentially meaningless. Death brings meaning to our lives. Death inspires our life. And yet we have it hidden in the closet, and we're so fearful of us. When we talk about death, communicate death, plan for it, make it part of our lives, we allow the space and incentive to focus on what is truly important and meaningful. People choose to be part of the Death Cafe for so many reasons, but it's worth noting, as there's over 14,000 cafes all over the world, that it's meeting a felt need that we have and demonstrating that some people in our society and elsewhere are willing to and able to talk about death-related subjects, and they find meaning from it. I also want you to know this isn't a grief support group. There's no lecture or educational materials or promoting any business or cause. Communication about end-of-life issues really is the key to understanding and making the best and rational decisions for our life. We can't magically make death disappear from our lives, nor can we completely erase the sadness and other forms of distress associated with death-related issues. However, we can talk about it. We can share insights and attitudes. We can learn from each other, and we can strive to cope more effectively with dying, death, and bereavement and life. There's no doubt that it inspires and fulfills our life having these conversations. So welcome to the cafe. And this cafe is for you. I'm here just to support and facilitate. As I mentioned earlier, I've had the honor for 35 years of supporting those nearing the end of life, those with terminal illness and their loved ones, and after death, supporting people on the integration of death on their life and grieving their loved ones. So it's such an honor to be here, and I welcome you here. I want to check in and see who's popped on. Hi, Robin. Nice to have you here. And Dawn from Hawaii. Aloha. Lovely to have you here. Donna Marie from Maryland, DC area. Lovely to have you. Lisa is one of our end-of-life practitioners, intern from Long Beach. Nice to have you here. Hope you're feeling better, sweetie. And lovely. So the floor is open for you. And I'll ask a prompt, what brought you to the Death Cafe? What's on your mind? I know there's many things you can do besides the Death Cafe. What did you want to hear about tonight? What did you want to learn about? How does death bring meaning to your life? I can talk and I will, but I really want to hear what brought you here and what's on your mind, what questions you have about dying, death, and beyond. Anything that moves through you is welcome in our circle today. But I'm really called, as you're thinking and wanting to share, to really reflect on the different type of deaths in life and the effects that we experience from death. I've had a couple deaths in my life this week, as a matter of fact. One was a sudden death. One was from a slower disease process. Actually, there's been 3. One was a client, one was a friend, and one was a family member, and one was a violent death. And what I'm so struck by the different ways of dying is how the ripples of death affect the living, how the experience lands within us. For example, I believe most of you will be aware of grief processes and the difficulty of grief. There's a beautiful, famous psychiatrist, as many of you will know, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that was kind of the founding mother of bringing the hospice movement to the United States. But she also spent a lot of time with patients, spent a lot of time in the medical system to try and open up the conversations about death. She would love the death cafes. And she came up with what we call a stage-based theory on dying and grief, where we go through these stages of death, from denial to anger to frustration to bargaining and to acceptance. And she's been real criticized for her theory because grief doesn't happen in this kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 stages. We weave in and out of so many emotions. Yes, we're in a denial and or a shock. Shock feels like a better description of what happens right after someone dies. They're no longer here in their body near us. And our minds, bodies, and spirits takes a while to assimilate and process. And the brain actually shuts down when there's trauma and shock. There's a part of the brain where our rational thinking comes from that shuts down, and we respond in an emotional way. We actually we can't think. I don't know if you can remember times when you've had heavy grief processes, and it's hard to put thoughts together or string words together in a sentence. Oftentimes we're forgetful. That's how I know for myself, as well as with clients, that we're in kind of a shock period, and it takes time for us to ground and drop back into our body. I have an expression of time and tears heal, not just time, not just tears. It takes both. And that's something important to remember, especially if you're the one grieving. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of love, and a lot of support to work through our grief processes. It's complicated, it's messy, and it often takes our breath away. The hard part for us watching someone grieve is our hearts hurt and we want to make it better. The reality is we can't make it better for someone. We can just hold them and love them through. I believe the greatest gift we can give someone that's grieving is our heart, is our time, is our presence, and is not advice. We're not ready to take anything in. But a jar of soup might help. An I love you might help. Sitting by someone's side as they scream or cry or just be in silence. In other words, learn how to hold that sacred space for someone. Grief is complicated. We have to figure out how to be without this person in our lives. If it was a close relationship, sometimes our lives are so enmeshed. And who am I now without this person in our life? We will find our way, but we don't know what that looks like. Grief does not have a timeline either. I don't think we actually find closure or resolve our grief. It changes faces, it changes intensity, it changes spirit, it changes the texture within us, and often becomes a portal for transformation in our life and evolution in our life. You know, part of our shock is we know we're going to die, but do we really live that? Not in Western culture, at least. not in Western culture. Love to hear your thoughts on this. I have some comments I want to catch up with here to see what people's thoughts are. Don, that's okay. If anything comes through that you want to express, feel free. And I'm so happy you're part of the conversation and find value in it. That warms my heart. Kathy, you also have 3 passings this week. Oh, my heart is with you. One being a hospice patient who turned 92 days before. Made me realize how beautiful life is as I was able to be part of her end journey. I gave in and took a few days to process it all. I'm so happy, Kathy, you took time for yourself, because truly it does take time. There's no way not for it to take time. And our lives are so busy, especially if you're working at a hospice and you're working with patient after patient. It's so important to take the time to process in our hearts, in our minds, in our bodies. And that helps us start to assimilate. And how lovely you've moved to a place of seeing how beautiful life is as death reflects that to us. Death reflects the sacredness of this life. Those of you that have experienced sudden death understand this more than anybody. 1 minute someone's there, 1 second someone there, and the next second they're gone. Yeah. It is priceless. We also have to feel, though. Sometimes often we want to circumvent those emotions and just move forward. I don't think we really can move on in life until we face these feelings, till we find our version of tears. Some of us don't cry. Till we experience the anger of it all. Till we recognize it is a death. Till we come to terms with mortality, that this is part of life, and find the jewels that are in this experience of life and in the experience of death. Yeah. Some of your thoughts. Does this resonate for you? Do you have a different experience? Maria, welcome. You work as a death doula. Beautiful. Welcome. Sometimes the family does not want the patient to know what are my thoughts. That's a great inquiry, Maria. Thank you. And I'm an end-of-life practitioner, death doula as well, for many, many years. And I've run across many families that don't want the patient to know. It's very interesting. In Western culture, we tend to believe that the dying should know that they're dying, although sometimes that's not always clear. Sometimes the medical community doesn't always communicate that. And sometimes the patient wants to keep fighting till the end and not facing death. You know what, Maria, that's all okay. And I want to share with you that some cultures don't share the death with the dying. They let them know that they're dying for sure. Some of the Asian cultures don't share with their loved one that they're dying, as they see it as an ingenuine form of protecting them. And it's part of their culture. It's part of their belief system. That may not resonate for us, but I believe it's absolutely something that we should honor. When I teach our end-of-life practitioners and death doula in our training program about just this topic, is my goal in the teaching is to teach them how to walk by someone's side, be present, explore our personal judgments and shoulda, woulda, couldas, and create the knowledge, the education, the compassionate space to put those aside to allow their clients, their patients, and their families to express their truth in life, their truth in dying, and their truth in death. Part of a death doula's responsibility in my heart is to just do that. I kind of share with them sweetly. It's our job to get out of the way and to see what shows up and let them guide us in what their needs are so we can support them with compassion, with resources, with education, and with tools so the dying can die the way they choose and the living can support them on that path. When that happens, we have transformation. When that happens, we have transcendence. And when that happens, we have a peaceful death, usually, because they've resigned themselves to living fully up until their death. So that's really what we're doing, is we're living as fully as we can till we take our last breath. It's not about dying, it's about living until we are dead. Yeah, dying's part of life too, all on this continuum. I hope that's helpful, Maria, to you. And I am sure you run across so many clients with different needs, desires, wishes. I have a line in one of my textbooks that says there's 7.4 billion people in this world and 7.4 billion ways to die. Yeah, there's some crossovers and we have some similarities because we're all dying, but we have our uniqueness just as we are the same as humans, and we have our individuality from the perspective of how we articulate this life. I have a little parable I share that I love because The Wizard of Oz was one of my favorite childhood stories. Many of you, I'm sure, have watched it. And I'm wondering if you remember the scene when Dorothy, the Lion, the Tin Man, and of course Toto come right out of the dark and shadowy forest. And in front of them in the distance, beyond this beautiful poppy field, is the Emerald City of Oz, beautiful in all its glory, green Emerald City. Do you remember that particular place in the story? And the yellow brick road starts to disappear in the poppy seeds. Do you remember what happens next? The wicked witch finds them, and she's looking through her poisonous looking glass, and she puts a spell and a potion on the field and poisons the flower, and they're starting their leap. I'm off to see the wizard. And they start dancing through the field, hooked arm in arm, and then they collapse in the poppy fields. Well, they wake up a period of time later. But what they don't show us in that scene, and as you know, she makes it to Oz, is under those poppy fields is hundreds, maybe thousands of yellow brick roads. And each of us may be on the same yellow brick road, and we may pop over into different yellow brick roads. There's thousands of them. They all lead to Oz. And if we look at Oz metaphorically as home, if we look at Oz right now as death, we're all on our road there, but we will meet there in death. The roads will cross. So our values, our perspective, our needs, our desires, our visions, our ideas may be unique in some ways, but they're all leading us to the same place. I think that's one of the beauties of free will. And one of the beauties of this existence. There's so many ways to be on this earth. There's so many ways to live. Our job is to find what brings meaning to our life. If we have meaning in our life, it'll be a meaningful death. So paint your yellow brick road. Maybe you're going to pop over to a different yellow brick road and honor thy neighbor's road, because we have something to learn from each other as well. I hope that was a little helpful story. I think about that often, and it reminds me, especially when I have a judgment that comes up. Dawn, I'm 75 and prepared to leave, but if I live another decade or so, that would be great. I wake up each morning with my daily mantra, I'm alive and well. another day to enjoy. Thanks, Don. That's an awesome mantra. I'm alive and well, another day to enjoy. And may you have many days to enjoy. And beautiful for you that you're prepared to leave. How did you prepare to leave? You know, that's a question that I'm asked often. You know, how do we work through fear of death? There's an intellectual fear of death, there's an existential and an embodied fear of death. How do we face our mortality? What are your thoughts? Thank you, Maria, and bless you as a hospice nurse. You're some of my favorite people in the world that I've worked with for 35 years. In 30 years, they know they're dying. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, even if we don't tell someone they're dying, somewhere inside they know, some from the head, some from the heart, and some from the soul. But there's a part of them that knows. I believe that's the soul part myself. But I think that's an important point that you bring up. So thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for the beautiful, beautiful work you do in this world. You are a blessing and an angel. And I love working with nurses. So how do we prepare to leave? How do you prepare to leave? What are some of the things that you've done? And Don, you expressed that you're prepared and you have this daily mantra, I'm alive and well, another day to enjoy. Think about that. And because what that says to me is you have gratitude for this life. And gratitude helps us be alive. And gratitude helps us prepare for death. How so? I believe one of the ways gratitude helps prepare us for life is that we're grateful for this life that we have. For some, that may cause us to cling and attach to life. But for others, it'll cause us to see the sacredness in this life. And death brings meaning to this life. What if you would never die? How would that change your perspective on life? What would bring meaning to life? See, death keeps us in time and space, in this life, in this embodiment, in this body, right? Many cultures around the world, in many religions around the world, what lives on after death is soul, is spirit, is that which is beyond words and that which is greater than ourselves. That's what lives on beyond this physical world. But we're having a physical experience. We're having an embodied experience. We're having a human experience. And that's different than a soul's journey after death. It's hard for us to comprehend. I don't think the egoic mind can understand death. I think that's understood in the heart and soul. And that's the place that we can prepare. Thank you, Maria. You prepare through your soul. The dead do not cry for us. We cry for the dead. Beautiful. Yeah. The dead do not cry for us. We cry for the dead. We do. Because the part of our brain, our cognition, our consciousness that remains cries and weeps. That what moves on is in different paradigm. I often have clients say to me, I'm going to miss my children, or I'm going to miss my partner, or my love, or my grandchildren. And I ask the question, will we miss after we die? Big question mark. Yes, in this human experience, we miss, we long, we attach. But after we die, do we? Been so many beautiful people that have shared their near-death experiences. You may have heard of this as an NDE. And they've shared this amazing experience of after death. Excuse me, one second. Thank you. They share they don't want to come back after they die. They feel free. They're not feeling a lot of earthly emotions. They're feeling something else that they really can't put in words, although they try. And thank goodness they try, because it helps us get a greater awakening to what might be on this lifetime. There's so many schools of thoughts about afterlife, about through religion, through spirituality, through different cultures. There is that not one yellow brick road after death. I think what brings us peace in this life, preparing for death, is to take the time to study, to learn, to explore what our beliefs are for after this life. What brings you comfort in what will happen after you leave this body? Nobody knows. People have come back after a short period of time to tell us what their afterlife experience is, but nobody's come back after a few years, so we truly don't know. But the search is of great value. The exploration is of great value. It brings meaning to your life, as well as comfort and more peace with death and afterlife. Often my breath is taken away when I'm face to face with someone that has a terrorizing fear of death, and they're facing their death. They're approaching the end of life. It takes my breath away. It's so frightening and so scary. I really don't have words to explain it except for terrorizing. There is an expression called the mysterium tremendum, and it's a Latin word that means terror and mystery all tied together. We have this fascination with death, don't we? It's all over the media, in our films, in our television shows, in our video games, in the news ad nauseum, and we're drawn to it like glue, to get stuck with it. And yet, facing our own personal fears is terrorizing. And it is an embodied terror, one that has that physical and emotional and spiritual experience. There are several approaches to start to heal that, through having the conversations about death, through joining death cafes, through finding counsel, through planning for death. There's a beautiful practice called Yoga Nidra, graceful transition. You can go on the Heartway website to find more about that. And it's a guided visualization to help shift consciousness. It actually changes the patterns of brain waves that put us in a state of Yoga Nidra, which is a state of consciousness that from a brain wave is between alpha and theta, which is a relaxed, awake and aware, yet completely relaxed state of consciousness. And it's outside of time and space, like death is. So it becomes a beautiful practice for preparing for death, as well as many other things. There's a lot of science behind it as well. The most important thing, I think, is having these conversations, is looking inside at our fears. What are we afraid of? How can we support ourselves and our loved ones? Are we prepared to die? Do we have our paperwork in order? Have we had these conversations with our loved ones so they know what our wishes are? These are all things that etch away at our fears. Let me check in with you guys. Thank you for sharing. it's so helpful for each other as well as myself. One of the things I love about the Death Cafe is I learn so much as well. Dawn, thank you for using the word gratitude. That is an essential part of my morning mantra. I'm grateful for another day. I think gratitude serves us in so many ways in living fully wholeheartedness. So thank you. And Maria, I was crushed by my car last year, and I never gave a human recognition. I was at peace. Beautiful. My heart is with you. It sounds like that was a traumatic experience as well. Sounds like through facing your death, correct me if I'm wrong here, Maria, through facing your death, you found peace. Yeah. Many people that face their death actually die or was in a car accident or died on the table during surgery or had a near-death experience, report the same, that they were peaceful. That makes me kind of question, why are we so frightful of death? Why do we imagine that death and afterlife is worse than this life? This is a hard life we face, right? There's a lot of trials and tribulations. What if afterlife is absolutely stupendous, incredibly peaceful, incredibly easy, incredibly free? That is for sure a possibility. But somehow we're laced with a fear, and that we might not be going somewhere better than here. Well, I think part of that is a culturated experience for us. Part of that is religious. We have religions that talk about heaven and hell. That's also to inspire living our life as fully as possible, living a good life, caring for each other. Mm-hmm. COVID changed the conversation around death as well. So many people died in hospitals away from their loved ones. I don't want to say alone like we often do, because there were absolutely incredible first line caregivers there holding people's hands, making the very, very best to support people. And yes, they were overwhelmed. And yes, they were pushed against the wall. And yes, they were exhausted. But caregivers, nurses, social workers, doctors, aides are the most compassionate, loving people. And they're doing this work because it's their calling. It's their dharma. It's what they are meant to do. And they do it so beautifully. Even during COVID, many of the hospitals put warm water in the hospital gloves and then put the hospital glove with the warm water and weaved it in the fingers of those that were very ill, so they would have a feeling of somebody holding their hands. It was beautiful, staying together. And many died without being near their loved ones. And millions of people died during COVID around the world. It was one of the few things we all shared with every human being on the planet. That changed things. Death was more in our face. Many countries face death every way, everywhere. So it changed how we see death. It made it scarier for some, for sure. Many of us walked around, especially at the beginning of COVID, not knowing if COVID would infect us and kill us. So we lived in a fright. We lived in a fright. And the best way to prepare for death is to prepare for life and prepare for death. Living each day to the fullest, honoring this life we have. We have absolutely no idea when life will end. What do you need to do so you have no regrets in your life? Don, thank you. I love this. No afterlife is needed. My given life has already been wonderful. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And that's what I love about the Death Cafe. No matter how many are online now, others will watch this on YouTube and Facebook later, and just to hear the different perspectives. And it warms my heart to hear that you're living life so fully. I don't think we can ask anything more of ourselves than to live life to our fullest. Maria, you're bringing an amazing topic. How does one manage suicide for the bereaved? Suicide and violent deaths, and suicides sometimes are violent deaths or homicide, are the most difficult death to find peace in, to come to terms with, and to move through, because it's so sudden and sometimes so violent. And the feeling is this life was taken from us, this life was cut short. And that is one of the hardest experiences in life to understand, to process, to forgive, to find peace in. So I want to make sure I understand your question, Maria, too, before I say more. Manage suicide for the bereaved. Are you talking about those that are grieving that become suicidal, or somebody that had a suicidal death? Both are important, big, huge topics, but I want to address what you're needing here, Maria. So if you don't mind writing a little bit more for me. And Gray, I like to acknowledge and respond to your sharing. Your brother passed away suddenly in October at 32 in a violent manner, and it has definitely made me more aware of life and death, and has also brought me a sense of peace that he has found something outside of this life, even if we grieve him here. He also said that there had to be a better thing after, because the universe was too beautiful for only sadness. And I completely agree with that. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing that. It was beautifully written. And gosh, I thank your brother for sharing something so profound. I love there had to be something after better, because the universe was too beautiful for only sadness. And I completely agree. Yes, when you're talking about suicide, those that take their life, they are in such pain in this life. They could not find their way to peace, whatever that was. There's no judgment on that, on what are they woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's their experience of this life. There's sadness in us for those that loved ones, because we want people to get the most out of life, to find joy and find peace. And some of us just don't. And it's such a beautiful way to look at that for him. And I also send love out to him and his hope and peace in his afterlife journey. And it also sounds like it also left you with some peace. You found your way to honoring his death, as well as inspiring your life. And that's what death absolutely can do for us. The beauty is we have that opportunity to heal. We have that opportunity to grow. We have that opportunity to transform. Sometimes it's so hard. It just is. But it is through our suffering that the alchemy of transformation happens. We learn in our suffering. We learn from our pain. It has value. It's not meaningless. I think we learn more from our suffering than our joy. Suffering has a depth, a weight, a character. It brings us to our knees, and then we rise. We rise, we resurrect, transformed. We move through it. I come from the mind that we're here to learn this life, and everything is our teacher if we choose, if we can look, if we can search, if we can dig deep. And as Gray, your brother shared, the universe is immense. The universe is huge. We're a speck in this universe, and understand a speck of the universe. There's so much to learn and gain. And our pain from loss, from any type of loss, from death, from harm, transforms us. Transforms us. And the best way to support loved ones or clients, some of you are death doulas and end-of-life practitioners, is to be with them, to honor them, to hold them, to listen to them without judgment, to be in silence with them, and honor the time that it will take for them to heal, and letting them know they're not alone. And then they have a touchstone, someone that can sit with them while they scream or cry. That's priceless. That's absolutely priceless. Because we can't take the pain away. That's going to be their work and their job, and they will get there. And for some, it's overwhelming, hugely overwhelming. And if you have a loved one that's hurting so badly that they're not able to function in their normal life, get them some additional support. See if they'll go to see a grief counselor so that they have someone to walk by their side also, and to take some of those deep dives, and who have a lot of experience supporting somebody through grief. Those are the gifts you can bring them. Bring them a meal. Don't ask, just show up with something, drop it at the front door if they're not able to receive you. It's those touches that people remember and that give them hope and love. Yeah. We never know if something's good or bad. It's hindsight when we learn. I grew up in a very, very violent house, physically and emotionally. It was an awful childhood. I don't have a lot of good memories, to be very honest. And I was pretty depressed and anxious for many years. There were moments when I didn't want to live, for sure. There were moments for sure. And now in hindsight, and a lot of work with myself and in counseling, and I chose a path to be a healer, and have spent 35 years doing this work. And every day I grow and deepen and heal. But we learn in hindsight. And I know my childhood prepared me to be able to be with the dying and their loved ones. I know it allowed me to understand suffering and the value of it, and understand that sometimes just being in silence and sitting by someone's side is enough. And letting someone know they're loved can make all the healing difference in the world. Yeah. Thank you all so much for your sharing. Let me grab a couple more. Is to a grave I became a hospice RN when my mom died. What can I give to others? And I went to hospice. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. You share so beautifully, Maria, how death transforms life, how death inspires life. Your mom's death from your little sharing, and I only, of course, know from your sharing, changed your life and inspired you to spend 30 years giving to the dying and their loved ones. That's a powerful testimonial on how death changes our life. I'm going to guess several of you have a similar experience, how death inspires life. Yeah, it just does. You know, think about it. Think about, some of you shared many deaths this week, and it creates a pause, a silence, and a moment in our life. We look through life from a different lens after someone dies. And yes, sometimes the lens is cracked and painful and dark, but it clears up, it transforms. But life is not the same after a death. It's precious, sacred, so very, very short. You know, my fear of death drew me to this work. That's what brought me here. I was so terrified of death. So terrified of death that I wasn't living at all. I was pretty miserable. Yeah. And that's what drove me into 35 years of working with the dying. My first patient as a hospice volunteer died in my life, in my arms. And that changed my whole perspective. It was that moment, almost like the lights came on. I was home, but I couldn't describe that in words. I could describe that in sensations and feelings, and a divine drop in, that which is greater than myself. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa, sweetie. I really appreciate that. And no worries here. I'm so grateful for life and living. And I want to absorb as much experience as I can and serve to the best of my ability. Thank you for sharing, Lisa. You were sharing that you were facing a weird fear of death yourself and kept running from the idea of looking at it. Yeah, we do run. You know what's so funny about running? You can run, but you can't hide. You can't hide. It doesn't go away. We can bury it. We can look away. We can ignore it, but it's still there. It's still there. And the sad part of looking away or ignoring it or denying it, it festers inside of us into a dis-ease of the mind, of the body, in the body, and of the spirit. Because you can't run from death. You can't hide from it. And it won't stay buried. It won't stay buried. So the beauty in that is our opportunity to face it and deal with it and utilize it to live to the fullest that we can. And yes, Donna, death is a wise teacher. It's wisdom. It does. I love what you said. It's also our tagline. Thank you, Donna. Death informs how to honor and embrace life. Death is all around us, all the time, constantly reminding you to live and love. Yes, it's there for all of us. Just look outside and watch the seasons. Yes. Watch the seasons, summer, the heat, plants that are turning brown, right? The fall, the leaves are falling. Absolutely. Death is all around. And embracing life is honoring death. If you're honoring death, you are embracing life. If you're embracing life, you're honoring death. You can't separate them. We do it all the time. because we have that mind, that dualistic mind. But you can't separate it. If you're truly embracing your life, then you've honored death some way, somehow in your life. If you're honoring death, then you embrace your life fully. It goes to the saying of someone will say to me, I don't want to talk about death. And I'll say, oh, good, I don't either. And they'll give me that look. Yeah, you're that death lady. No, I really want to talk about how you want to live until you die. It's truly where we want to be. Wow, we just have a couple minutes. I want to thank you all so much for your wise thoughts and counsel and sharing your heart. From my deepest heart space, I hope that the Death Cafe supports your living and life, and that we learn from each other. Please know that the Heart Way is there for you in any way. Resources, the website's loaded with a lot of beautiful things. We're a nonprofit, so we don't charge for services at the end of life. We rely on the grace of the community and writing of grants to help support us. And if you're called to connect with us, please, we would love for you to be part of the Heartway family, and mostly let us know how we can support you. And in the last minute or two, is there anything else that you'd like to say or share? Thank you, Sanim. You are wonderful yourself. For me, it's a complete privilege and honor to be here. Please take the best care of you. I want to close with the Ram Dass quote, if I may. Rather than closing ourselves to fear, we learn to open to it, to sit with it, and allow it to arise and pass on its own time. I want to read that one more time because it's just perfect for this evening sharing. Rather than closing ourselves to fear, we learn to open to it, to sit with it, and allow it to rise and pass on its own time. And that's what we need to do with love, with grief, with life. Let it rise and let it pass and move and deepen. Be safe, be love, and be you. With love from my heart to yours. Bye-bye, everybody.